This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi!
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered Republicans a true mixed bag on Monday, handing President Donald Trump one major win, two frustrating losses, and a reminder that legal battles shaping the country are far from over. First, the court ruled 5-4 that President Trump's attempt to remove Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook, who I've referred to on this show as Lisa Crook, given the documented case of mortgage fraud against her, was procedurally invalid. The justices said that Cook must remain in her post for now, while lower courts consider President Trump's bid to remove her over those mortgage fraud allegations, which, in all honesty, she denies. Now, the ruling did not clear Cook. It simply said that she was entitled to notice, evidence, and a chance to respond before the removal. But in a major victory at the same time for presidential power and against the administrative state, the court also ruled that President Trump lawfully fired Democrat FTC Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter, which overturned a 1935 precedent and confirmed broader Article II authority over executive branch officials. So let me get this straight. They essentially said the president couldn't fire a Federal Reserve Board member, as if that's a fourth branch of government, but he could fire an FTC commissioner. Makes little sense to me, but then I'm not a lawyer. President Trump celebrated that decision as a historic win for presidential accountability. But when it came to election law, the Republicans took another serious hit. In a 5-4 ruling, the court upheld Mississippi's law allowing absentee ballots postmarked by Election Day to be counted if received up to 5 business days later. Evidently, Election Day does not mean Election Day. Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote that the federal law sets the date voters choose, not necessarily the day ballots must arrive. Now, Justice Samuel Alito warned in his dissent that this invites post-election uncertainty. Finally, the court declined to hear the president's appeal of the E. Jean Carroll case, leaving in place a $5 million civil judgment. This is the most outrageous decision of them all, but it was overall one clear constitutional win and several reminders the courts can deliver disappointing rulings even from supposedly conservative jurists. Meanwhile, in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, celebrated Somali Independence Day over the weekend with a public message praising Minnesota's Somalian community. Even his videos from the celebration sparked anger online as major fraud investigations tied to state programs result in many Somalis being charged and imprisoned for defrauding the taxpayers. The mayor, who's politically correct, wrote on X, "Happy Somali Independence Day," saying Somali Minnesotans have enriched the city through resilience, culture, and leadership. But footage from the festival showed Somali flags waving in Minneapolis as one speaker declared, "Somalia is already home right here in Minnesota." Lieutenant Governor Penny Flanagan also attended, using the event to attack President Trump and declare that Trump's hate has no home here. Representative Ilhan Omar's political team promoted her appearance at both Pride events and at the Somali Day Festival. Frey told the crowd that during Operation Metro Surge, a Trump-era federal immigration and public safety push, they tried to come for some of us, adding, "In Minneapolis, we do not see you as immigrants, we see you as family." Well, legal is legal and illegal is illegal. The political celebration comes as Minnesota Democrats face hard questions over fraud and accountability, A Republican-led House Oversight Committee recently accused Governor Tim Walz, that's Tampon Tim, and his administration of ignoring repeated warnings about fraud in the state's social service programs, including the massive fraud in the Feeding Our Future scandal, largely due to fears of looking racist over investigating the Somalians involved. More than 110 people have been charged so far in the Minnesota fraud schemes, and investigators estimate roughly $300 million in federal child nutrition funds were stolen during COVID. The disaster in Minnesota is a microcosm of what the embrace of woke multiculturalism is doing to our country. We have a nation that holds everyone accountable and sends people back to where they belong if their culture is incongruent with the American freedom and if they're here illegally. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump stepped up using the Faith and Freedom Coalition Road to Majority Conference last Friday to sound the alarm about the growing communist threat inside the United States. Speaking to religious conservatives, President Trump pointed to recent socialist victories in New York City's Democratic primary, warning that these candidates are not really social Democrats, but Marxist radicals who want to destroy the traditional American way of life. President Trump said communism is easy to sell because it promises everything for free. Free rent, free housing, free groceries, free food, and endless government handouts. But he warned that history shows the same result every time: economic collapse, lawlessness, shortages, squalor, and eventually full-blown tyranny. President Trump argued that the same far-left ideology is taking hold in places like New York and California, where politicians promise government control while ordinary citizens, property owners, and taxpayers are left to pay the price. President Trump has accused Democrats of refusing to confront the radical left because they're afraid of losing primary elections. Instead of standing up to extremists, he said the party is allowing itself to be pulled further towards the road to socialism, if not Marxism. At the faith-focused gathering, President Trump noted that communist movements have historically targeted religion, especially Christianity. He said the threat is not just economic, but spiritual and cultural. President Trump also criticized New York's rent freeze policies, saying they amount to government confiscation and will only drive landlords out, damage housing, and turn one-grade neighborhoods into slums. His closing message was direct. Communism belongs to the failed past, freedom is America's future, and voters must turn out in the midterms to stop the spread of this toxic ideology. Meanwhile, former President Joe Biden was met with heckling at a Maryland Democrat Party fundraising gala where pro-Palestinian activists branded him Genocide Joe during his remarks to party donors. The party appearance came at a 2-year anniversary of Joe Biden's disastrous debate against President Donald Trump, the debate that effectively ended Biden's 2024 re-election campaign and exposed what Republicans had warned about for years. Rather than address his own failures, Biden used the fundraiser once again to attack President Trump, accusing him of weakening America abroad and claiming Trump has brought corruption on a scale never seen before in American history. Biden also mocked Trump over White House renovations projects and the reflecting pool, calling him a loser. But outside the event, Biden's own left-wing base wasn't buying the performance. Demonstrators outside were holding up signs saying, Biden's go home, Genocide Joe. So we've even reached a point in the Democrat Party where Joe Biden is out of the mainstream, where the left protests Joe Biden, the most immediate recent former president. Inside the room, one protester shouted over Biden's speech, appearing to call him Genocide Joe, before security removed her as the donor crowd booed. The scene was a reminder of the deep fractures inside today's Democrat Party. Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman is long dead. Corporate left Democrats are now seriously threatened by their own left wing. If Chuck Schumer, I say it again, is challenged by AOC in New York State, I believe he will be toast. Biden is trying to reemerge as an elder statesman, but many activists still blame his administration for the handling of the Israel and Gaza issues, while conservatives remember the inflation, the border chaos, the foreign policy weakness, and the credibility crisis that defined the Biden presidency. Since leaving office, Biden has largely stayed out of view due to his lack of cognitive fitness, which is now being admitted by Democrat elites who attempted and failed to pull the wool over the people's eyes when Biden was still in office. Recently, Biden lost a federal court case in which he tried to withhold the tapes that he had made with his biographer, significant because it was those tapes that Special Counsel Robert Hur depended on in making his determination as to whether Biden himself should be prosecuted for his retention of classified documents. It is indisputable that Biden retained classified documents in violation of law from the time he was a U.S. Senator and from the time he was Vice President of the United States. And they made a decision that he would not be prosecuted because of his failing health and his age. At the same time, Special Counsel Jack Smith was charging President Donald Trump with the retention of classified documents with the full knowledge that the Presidential Records Act gave Trump the full authority to retain and declassify those documents. Biden has stayed out of sight for obvious reasons. It's because the failure of the establishment-owned crooks like Biden and the radical left is now rising. The fracturing and potential destruction of the nation will be Biden's legacy. There's nothing much he can do about it at this point. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan now are examining allegations of financial crimes tied to one Neville Roy Singham, a Chinese-based tech financier accused of bankrolling far-left activist groups, media projects, and nonprofit networks that push anti-capitalist and pro-communist messaging in the United States. The probe, reportedly authorized by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and led by U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton in the Southern District of New York, is said to be looking at possible wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, and other financial crimes. Subpoenas have reportedly been issued for bank records and related financial documents. Investigators and watchdogs are looking at Singham's entire network. My good friend Sam Antar at whitecollarfraud.com has exposed much of this. I'm happy to see federal prosecutors now looking at it. Reports allege that hundreds of millions of dollars moved through donor-advised funds, shell companies, and nonprofits before reaching groups tied to socialist activism, anti-American protests, and pro-China narratives. The New York Times itself previously reported that Singham has worked closely with the Chinese Communist government propaganda networks while funding organizations around the world that blend far-left advocacy with Beijing-friendly talking points. For most Americans, the concern is obvious. This is not just campus activism or grassroots protests. This is a sophisticated money pipeline that is helping to radicalize American politics from the outside in. As Democrats struggle to explain their party's sharp leftward turn, the American people deserve answers. Who's funding these groups? Where did the money go? And how much foreign influence is hiding behind America's so-called progressive movement?